Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation on glass recycling in Nebraska. We'll give people some time to roll in, but I'll just get started with my little introduction. My name is Lauren Smith, and I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Conservation Nebraska's Common Ground program. Conservation Nebraska's mission is to protect our state's natural legacy by educating the public, supporting communities, and increasing civic engagement, which we accomplish through locally led education efforts and community engagement projects to address local conservation concerns. Before I introduce tonight's speakers, there are a few rules to go over. For those joining online, your cameras will remain off and you'll be muted throughout the presentation. Please type any questions you have in the chat or the Q&A section, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. But we have a couple different presentations, so if you have any pressing questions, feel free to put those in. Following the presentations, we will have a very brief survey that should only take less than a minute to complete. This survey helps support programming like this one, so we very much greatly appreciate you taking the time to fill this out. Tonight, we welcome many speakers who will each get a chance to share their perspectives on the current landscapes, challenges, and opportunities in glass recycling. First, we will hear from Kimberly Carroll Stewart, who is the Executive Director of the Nebraska Recycling Council, and she will share an overview on glass recycling across the state. Next, we have Dana. I'm already going to butcher her last name. She told me how to pronounce it right before this. Klabanis, who is the city clerk for the city of Neely, which is home to a recycling program with over 25 years of success. And lastly, we will have Spud Rowley, the executive director of Keep Kimball Beautiful in the Kimball Recycling Center. But I will hand it off to Kim to get us started. But thank you all for your time and for joining us tonight.
Hello, everyone, and I want to reiterate thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening to learn a little bit about glass recycling in Nebraska. As I said, my name is Kim Carroll Stewart. I am the Executive Director here at Nebraska Recycling Council. I have been in my position just about a year at this point. My background is actually in more of the natural resources. And so I really transitioned from more of sustainability, ecology, and really education and teaching others kind of how to teach these topics into the world of waste management about a year-ish ago at this point. And so I always like to give a little bit of a background on our organization. I know sometimes people know us, sometimes they don't. And so just kind of tell you who Nebraska Recycling Council is. And then we'll kind of hop into how we structure our work and how we build our work around recycling. Then we'll talk a little bit about glass recycling as a whole, why we should do it, the why, the how, the what. And then I will hand it off to what I would consider the experts tonight about really the on the ground and how it's being done in these communities, in these states. And so I'll kind of take it from a higher level, and then we'll let our other two panelists take over and really talk about what they're doing and the great work that's happening in those communities. And so going ahead and getting started here, Nebraska Recycling Council, for you, those of you who might not know us, is a statewide member-based nonprofit organization. So we are housed here in Lincoln, so that's where I'm kind of tuning in through tonight. But we do operate across the entire state of Nebraska. Our mission is really to maximize both economic and environmental benefits of what we consider resource recovery in the state. So if you take anything away from this that's outside of glass recycling, I want you to take away that waste terminology needs to really be shifted to resource and resource recovery and the economic impact of this. And so it expands beyond environmental. It really is an economic issue and an economic opportunity for us. And so our organization really envisions a future where all materials are reserved for what we call their best and highest use. And then landfill disposal is the last resort. And so I always like to have the caveat of like, we are not anti-landfill. We understand that things have to be landfilled. There are just certain materials or certain uses of things that they have to have that end of life disposal. We like to say, let's keep only those things going to our landfill and like, let's recover everything else and keep it into that circular economy structure. And so how we accomplish our work here is really through a couple of different areas. And so a lot of folks, when they do recognize us or do know us, is from technical assistance. And so this is the general, you reach out, you could be a citizen, you could be a city, a business. You reach out with a recycling or composting question, and we're directly communicating with you. We're building out green teams. We're talking about your waste and how to divert additional materials or what you're doing or starting a new program. We also offer through funding through Nebraska Environmental Trust. what we call the Recycling Equipment Grant Program, or REG. So if you are a business or you are a community and you're looking to fund some new equipment, we do offer some funding in that way. We both are interviewed pretty frequently, but then also conduct our own in-house research and do publications on that research about different materials and different things that are happening in the state around, again, waste management, sustainable materials management. We advocate and support our legislator. So this past session, and we will in the future as well, be meeting with representative officials, again, telling them, teaching them really about recycling, about the economic benefit of it. And then, of course, we do a lot of education and events. So things like tonight, doing webinars, we'll go out to tabling events. You'll kind of see us out in the community here and there, just really talking to people and getting a sense of what the needs are and what everyone kind of needs to be successful and to recycle right. And so I always like to start things with questions. And so I like to do this. I think sometimes we don't always think about waste and we don't think about our trash or our garbage. And so I always like to throw this out there. And so if you've had one of my presentations before, you've probably gotten this question already. But how much waste does the average person generate every day in the United States? If you want to plop it in the chat, if you want to just think about it in your head, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. So, perfect. I see a couple chats popping up. Let me get to them here. It'll let me. Perfect. Sweet. Yeah, we have a couple that are right on the money there. So it's actually 4.9 pounds per person per day. And so that is just in the United States. When we scale that out globally, what we see is global average is actually 1.6 pounds per day. So we in the United States are quite the little waste generators compared to the global average. I always like to take it then and look at the population of Lincoln. So I challenge you to take this back to your own communities, look at your population where you're at, and figure this out. But here in Lincoln, it's about 722 tons, 722 tons a day. If we scale that out, like I said, we operate statewide. And so scaling out one more time, we think about our state and thinking more about the amount of waste that's entering our landfills each day. As someone who comes from a background of education, scope and scale sometimes is challenging. Just saying a tonnage, what does that actually mean? But when we look at the amount of waste that enters our landfill each day, we're filling every seat in Memorial Stadium. So I think most of us have an idea of how big that is. And so think about that every day, day after day, week after week, year after year. We are generating quite a bit of waste. And so what our organization does and what we advocate for is to really follow what's called the waste management hierarchy. And we follow principles of sustainable materials management. And so this is really a systematic approach to using and reusing materials more productively over their entire life cycle. So we can think cradle to grave. So for glass, from the first time that the resources were mined, were created, it was produced, until it ends up what would be at the end of life would be a landfill structure. Hopefully we don't get to the landfill because glass is recyclable 100%. And so thinking that whole process, and it really represents a change in how society thinks about the use of natural resources, about economic benefits, and really about environment as a whole and environmental protection. And so we try to stay at the top half. So we do recycling and compost, but then we also talk a lot about and advocate for source reduction and reuse here. And so really saying that if we turn off the tap essentially, right? If we don't even generate the waste, it can never get down the hierarchy. And then we can figure out ways to reuse it, keep it in the system, and then we can do true recycling, which would be that one-to-one recycling. Downcycling is kind of included in that as well. So that essentially means that it's not going, so it wouldn't be glass to glass, or it would be textiles are a great one to use. It wouldn't be a shirt to a shirt. It might be a shirt to carpet padding. And so it's still getting reused. There's still economic value in that, but it's not that one-to-one. And then energy recovery, treatment, and disposal are kind of our lesser preferred means. We do use a hierarchy based on the EPA. And so if you're really familiar with kind of the waste in Nebraska, the energy recovery disposal, those can be flip-flopped a little bit in some of our materials more state here. We do choose to use the EPA one, which has the energy recovery just a slightly higher. Again, treatment and disposal, we like to reserve for those things like biomedical, hazardous waste, things that we don't have the technology yet to recycle safely and efficiently. And so moving into kind of today's topic and looking at glass recycling. And so I like to start with kind of the why. And a lot of these things can be scaled out to recycling in general, but focusing kind of solely on glass, one of the best things about glass is it is 100% recyclable. So glass does not degrade in quality or purity during the recycling process. It can be recycled endlessly, which is really meaning that once a glass bottle or glass vessel is created, it can just keep being recycled back into a new glass vessel, a new glass bottle. It can kind of change forms and shapes. And so we can do this over and over without any degradation. Something like plastic has a limit to that ability, and we can keep mixing in some virgin materials and we can extend that. But eventually that plastic is degraded to a point where it is no longer recyclable in the sense of manufacturing or this kind of recycling. You could do a chemical recycling process. That could be a whole other talk. But it doesn't have the same benefit of glass of just not degrading in that quality. We also find that glass recycling is going to save energy. So for every 10% of glass used in the manufacturing process of recycled glass, we see an energy drop in that creation of about 2 to 3%, up until about 30%. So when we get to 100% recycled glass, that's a 30% energy savings. The source is there if you want to dive into that a little bit more. But then recycled glass also melts at a lower temperature and it reduces the fuel needed in manufacturing. So anytime we're talking about recycling and recycled products, we really need to think of it as a system. And so stepping out in that system and looking at the manufacturing of that new material, then we see an energy savings at that scale as well. And so kind of continuing on the whys here. So it conserves raw materials. And so what we want to think about here is for every ton of glass that is recycled, it actually conserves more than a ton of natural resources. And so I put some kind of numbers of some general kind of the main components of glass. There's some other things that will get added depending on color and then what it's getting used for. But this is more than a ton to make. And so we see this savings when we are using recycled versus virgin material or virgin glass. We also see that using glass produces 20% less air pollution, 50% less water pollution than creating new glass from those raw materials. Some of that is that mining or that resource pooling process and transport and some other things that go into that. Again, always thinking about it as the system. And then scaling out a little bit and thinking about, again, the manufacturing side of things, we see this prolonged equipment life. And so lower cost for manufacturers with managing equipment and furnaces. And so I use the furnace example here, but using recycled glass is actually less corrosive. So it does less damage. There's less need to maintenance that equipment, but also lowers the melting point and melting temperature. So again, that fuel cost decreases, but it's also easier on the furnace to maintain a lower temperature over time. And then kind of finishing up why to recycle, it does reduce waste. So glass never truly decomposes in the true sense of decomposition. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. And so if we're putting it in the landfill, it's always going to stay in that landfill in some shape. It's going to get smaller and over time will break down, but it's still going to be there. It's just in smaller pieces. And so we really want to recoup, going back to that sustainable materials management, we really want to recoup and keep that value in the system. And so for every glass bottle we keep out of the landfill is one new glass bottle we can make. Again, it's a 1-to-1, 100% recyclable. The other piece here is thinking about circular economy and really building out away from that take, make, dispose system of a linear economy and building that circular economy. We know recycling as a whole actually creates more jobs and more economic value than other ways of ridding ourselves of waste, if you want to think of it more broadly. So we have jobs in the processing side, we have recycling side and the manufacturing side that are created through this. But then again, just keeping that valuable material in use and then reducing the need for new extraction and new production. And so kind of talking, I wasn't sure who all of our audience would be today. And so kind of talking a little bit about what kind of glass can be recycled, because not all things that we consider glass are necessarily truly glass. And so really, I've pulled some of this from Ripple Glass, being over in the eastern side of the state. Here, that's really who we use a lot of. So we're going to think of things like food and beverage containers. So these are going to be our salsa jars. If you're a sauerkraut person, sometimes that comes in a jar. Tomato sauce, tomato paste, any of those kind of food vessels. Beverage containers, wine, beer, a lot of the liquor, those will all also show up in those. I put drinking vessels here to kind of separate them out. These would be like going back to the beer, wine glass, pint glass, water glass, drinking glass. Mason jar could fit into this if you use one of those. Um, any kind of other jar that's not a food application. So you can think of like something like a candle, anything that comes in that glass jar. And then the one that I tend to generate a lot of is the cosmetic bottles. So I choose products that come in glass. And so any of the shampoos, conditioners, body washes, hand soaps, any of those kind of glass jars, and bottles and vessels as well. Again, if you have kind of the eastern part of the state, Ripple will also take things like single pane windows, shower doors, tabletops. Glass that does not have any kind of lamination in it is also acceptable through their system. Again, recycling is very localized though, and so always check with your drop site or check with your person who's picking that up if you happen to have a curbside or a pickup option with your community. Checking with them and making sure that those things, kind of the ones I listed on this slide, are going to be your most common, the ones that almost everyone's going to take, and then some of those other ones, sometimes we will see expansion. Kind of looking at what is not accepted then. So porcelain, ceramics, milk glass, a lot of these are kind of called glass. They're not truly, especially ceramic is not truly a glass. Mirrors, laminated, so those glasses that if they break, they kind of hold together. Those are not going to be in our recycling system. Pyrex, dishware, so our plates, our cup, our bowls, those types of things. And then the big one, I think, that we see a lot of kind of contamination and dumping on is going to be the electronics, and light bulbs and TVs, computers, kind of these pieces, again, are not going to go in the same. Not to say that these are not things that you can't reuse or recycle in a different form, just don't belong with our glass recycling or in our glass recycling bins. And so I did want to share, again, our image here from Ripple, just to kind of put a picture to all of the things I just said. Again, Ripple is going to be just glass. So if you see those bins, especially in Omaha, you have the purple bin. Here in Lincoln, we have a green bin. I have a picture in the next slide of both of those examples. Um, Definitely don't want any other kinds of recyclables in those. I didn't mention those, but no cardboard, no trash, no food waste, kind of those other contaminants that can sometimes happen. And so kind of thinking about how glass is actually then recycled. In Nebraska, I would say almost everywhere, it's going to be this drop-off collection method or drop-off site. I know Omaha does have an option if anyone's tuning in from there, for a pickup service. For the most of us, though, it's going to be we collect it in our house, we store it in a bin somehow, and once we get whatever threshold we're willing to accept, we are going to take it somewhere and then drop it off. So I've included the bins from both Lincoln and Omaha here. So Lincoln will have that green bin at the city drop sites. Omaha typically has the purple bins, again, the city drop sites or some other drop sites. Um, we're going to take them to that. One of the questions we always get, so I'll just kind of answer it ahead of time, is, well, why can't it go in a single stream? My other recyclables go in my curbside bin. Why can't I just put glass in there? It's 100% recyclable. Yes, that's true. It is 100% recyclable. But what happens is if we put glass in that curbside bin or that alley side bin, depending on where your pickup is, it's going to get mixed with those other recyclables. It's going to contaminate our fibers. And so glass breaks, right? It's going to break in either the bin itself or in the truck, and then it's going to get embedded into our paper, into our cardboard, and it actually contaminates them, and then they have to be downcycled. They can't be used at their full value. And so we really need to pull that glass out. We need to take it to the sites and drop it off there, or we need to have a separate service that picks it up separately from us. Sometimes when glass is picked up, then it ends up in that bin. Whoever, I think Spud will probably talk about the hauling side of this and moving it around. And so there's somebody then who's going to come in and then take it somewhere else. Sometimes they need to sort it, sometimes they don't. It just depends on the use it's going to be made for. But ultimately, it's going to get crushed and any kind of contamination is going to be removed. If it's making a new bottle, a new jar, like true one-to-one, I always like to say it's the three M's: mixed, melted, and molded. So it's going to get mixed. Either is 100% recycle, so get with other cullet, or it'll get mixed with virgin material. It'll get melted down in a furnace, and then it's going to be pressed or blown or molded into its new shape, its new form. Then it's going to go off from the manufacturing processing, but used for its new use. It does not need to be glass jar to glass jar, though. And so there's a lot of other applications. I've just listed a few here. So we see it going into fiberglass insulation. We can see it in construction materials. So aggregate for some concretes is being used, sometimes into road aggregate as well. Countertops, water filtration media, just a few different uses. Um, Again, should not go in your curbside bin, should go at a drop site unless you have a special service in your area. I wanted to include a few other images. I don't want to steal the other two panelists' thunder, so I didn't do too many different sites and things they're set up. Again, Lincoln and Omaha are going to have kind of these bin structures, but then we'll also see things like glass bunkers at other sites. This one actually is from Spuds here, some of these other storage methods. And so another, I think, great thing about glass sometimes is that it doesn't need to be sheltered from the rain, so it can sit out until you can get enough of it to haul it to somewhere else. And so, kind of just setting up that these can look different in different cities and different places. And it's really about what your community needs and how you want to build that out. So looking at kind of a map of the glass recycling and really what it looks like kind of in Nebraska, or picturing it a little bit more broadly. So in Nebraska right now, there's kind of this divide that we see, that really eastern Nebraska is kind of getting moved to Kansas City, with the western part of the state really getting moved kind of towards Denver. Um, I would say this map, in some ways, kind of simplifies the process more than what's really happening, but it does give a good image about where things are moving and kind of that divide that occurs with us. Now, not all of the glass is going to leave our state. I mean, I think sometimes when I look at this, that's kind of what it looks like. That's not necessarily true, and I'll let the other panelists kind of weigh in on that a little bit more. But if we would want to bring a new end market, so if we wanted kind of our own ripple glass here, we really need to be able to generate more data and more infrastructure and more mapping of where those materials are, where they may be going to, and moving to it. And that's not to say that that is the ultimate goal of this. This is more of a snapshot of what it kind of looks like now and how things are moving around the state. But again, really take away from this is that we kind of have this divide, where Eastern is going Kansas City and Western is kind of going to Denver and a couple different places there. And so one of the challenges, I did want to touch on this before I kind of wrap up my part of the talk tonight, is glass. You know, we can look at are some industries that really prefer using glass. There's some really great benefits to it. Some of the downside though is it is dense, and it is kind of heavy. And so when we're transporting, and we do have to transport it kind of long distances, we do see the increase in fuel costs. If we're thinking bigger environmental picture, we do have this additional carbon emission during shipping. So moving it from wherever to, Kansas City in our example, it does have that input in that way. If recycling facilities, and one of the challenges I think we see when we talk to municipalities is if that recycling facility is too far away, if there's not a great hauling option for them, it actually can become cheaper to landfill than it is recycling. And so there is this economic trade-off that is occurring. And so just to be aware of it and know that it's there. Again, better panelists will have more input on that, I'm sure. We do see contamination. I know we were talking before we started here, like different places and different systems. So if we're moving into the state, and we hear this a lot too from folks that are moving into Nebraska, well, I had a dual stream system. I could just put it in my curb. Like, why can't I do that? Or people just kind of like, oh, it's recyclable, I'm going to put it in the bin. And so really educating and making sure people understand, like, it does contaminate our single stream systems. There's a reason why we need to take it to a different site or have a different way of recycling it here. And then just thinking about markets. So recyclable materials, they have a commodity value, they have a value. And so sometimes the market dips, sometimes it increases. And so kind of being able to have the space and the time to store it. And sometimes it's waiting till that market increases. Sometimes it's moving it when you are at a loss. And so just depending on your city size, depending on your kind of environment that you're in, considerations of that market fluctuation are important. And so I know that was a kind of a quick, high level thing. I did want to give just some additional resources, and then of course we'll answer questions here at the end. We do have a glass report available, so if anyone wants to read more about that, that has a lot more of the case studies. That map is in there, some more descriptions of things are all in that. It's available on our website. And then I wanted to share just a few other external to Nebraska Recycling Council, broader additional resources. So Glass Packaging Institute, the Glass Recycling Coalition, and the Glass Recycling Foundation. I do believe the foundation and coalition are combining here shortly, and so something will change with that. They have a lot of shared resources already, but those are three great. If you want to dive a little bit more into glass, why is it beneficial? Why is it worth some of the costs and challenges with it? Great resources to kind of just start looking into and getting more into. And so for our final slide, I just wanted to share my contact information and our organization's website. You can follow us on social media as we try to post fairly frequently. And that QR code will actually link to our newsletter sign up. So we do a monthly newsletter where we'll kind of put out talks or advertise for different things, just a way to kind of get a better sense of recycling in the state as a whole. So with that, I will kind of yield my time and stop my screen share here.
Okay. Thank you so much. We have two questions already, so we'll just answer those now.
Okay.
Um, so the first question we have is, with all of our gravel and sand mining sites, does Nebraska have any glass manufacturing companies? I know you just kind of touched on that.
Yeah. So trying to think if we have, I'm not really sure. I usually stay on the other side of it. So I'm on the end of life side of things. I don't know. I would have to look into it, but I can look and I'll type an answer in if I find it. They probably do have someone. Because I know we do like fiberglass and stuff, and so like broader picture, there's those happening. But I don't know. I'm not on the manufacturing side too often.
And then our next question is, are there any programs that recycle colored soft/soda furnace glass used for manual glass blowing, such as BOMA, Bullseye, Oceanside, Spruce Pine? There are two colleges with glass blowing programs in Nebraska, and they recycle their own clear used glass by putting it back in the furnace. But once colors are added, they throw the glass away, as the colors would contaminate the furnace batch. They
Yeah.
produce quite a bit of colored glass scraps.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know that one. I don't know because I know like so like the hot shops in Omaha does something similar too with their glass blowing lab where they will recycle in-house until it gets contaminated. I don't know with them, I would say like typically, especially schools, I don't know how these two particularly or these examples interact. But I know with some of them they will use it for other materials. So they once it gets contaminated, they might move it from glass blowing to like mosaic or donate it to a school for that. And so there's like almost like a reuse piece that comes into some of those smaller operations. But as far as large scale programs, I don't know. I'll kind of do some searching here as the other speakers talk and see if I can get some good answers for you on those two.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think we're gonna hand it off to Dana, and then we have plenty of time for questions after her and at the end of this presentation as well. But please ask any questions you have. Dana, are you ready?
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we're all good.
Okay. So my name is Dana Klobnish. I am the city clerk, and I've been here just coming up on 16 years. I wasn't here when recycling first started, somewhere in the 90s, but I've been familiar with it since. I've lived in town for a number of years, and then, of course, working in this position as well. As city clerk, I'm working with all different departments, but recycling is definitely one of them. And so I'm familiar with a lot of the materials that we've recycled, and then we got started with glass recycling later on in 2019. The issue that we had was our compactor transfer station there had already recycled a number of materials, but glass was just not available to us yet. However, we had plenty of residents and businesses that were requesting, could we have an option to recycle glass? What would it take to get it started? And as our discussion started, we would like to add this, but our issue was how were we going to transport it somewhere and where was going to be that destination for it? Well, as you saw on that map earlier that Kim shared, there was a time in 2019 that Ripple Glass became known, and they must have been talking to a lot of area regional facilities, and we were one of them that got to start having some of those discussions. So we asked if we would be an option for them to start making an agreement with in the region. And at the time, we were told that you had to have a minimum of 25 tons to start an agreement. And we thought, well, we're not sure how much it's going to take or how long, but we were definitely interested in it. We knew that we had the space to accommodate this. Our outdoor yard has plenty of area where vehicles are pulling in to drop off their materials, whether it's recyclable or our solid waste items. So what we did is we used a concrete pad that we had to pour. It wasn't just sitting there. Our city staff poured this concrete pad that's 20 by 24 by 8 inches deep. The depth of it was reached by using those concrete blocks. Each one is 2 foot by 6 foot in dimension. And back in 2019, that concrete pad was just a little over $2,250. The concrete blocks, I don't believe we paid much for, if at all. There's a local concrete company, and when they're doing a concrete job and have a little bit left over, they would make the excess cement in these blocks. So in a sense, we were kind of recycling some of their leftover blocks as well. So that's how we got our pad or our site to go ahead and put the concrete. The issue with storing this is actually quite simple. It can be outside, as you guys heard earlier. It just has to be stored on pavement. And that's one of the responsibilities we have within our contract with Ripple Glass. Another one, glass can be broken pretty easily, but chances are when we are picking it up from curbside pickup or somebody's dropping it off, it's not smaller than ½ inch. I mean, you have to be pretty rough and be throwing it around for it to get into small pieces. So that's easily achievable. One of the other responsibilities we have is that the city will help load this glass onto the trucks that Ripple will arrange, whether they bring their own or they're hiring it out, however that works. Our first agreement started in 2019, and it was a 5-year agreement. And then there is a clause for an additional 5 more 1-year periods. So we are currently in the first 1-year period after that 5-year initial start got going for us. On the flip side, Ripple's agreement or their responsibilities within the contract include scheduling and paying for that transportation of glass from Neely to their facility. Again, we have to have a minimum of 25 tons for that trip to be set up or organized. And then Ripple will provide any of the reports to us summarizing the tonnage that they received, which is great for us to keep any kind of data, knowing how long it took and how much was actually collected when we did come up. If were we right at 25 or what was our end result number. One of the nice things is in our contract, we are not required to meet any certain time frame. That 25 tons doesn't have to be within 6 months or a year. There's not a quota or a schedule. It's just a matter of when we reach it, then we give them a call, we start lining up transportation and see what it can do to get something on the road. Since we've started this in 2019, we haven't had our first load yet. We estimate that we're pretty close to hitting it this fall. So we're right on the edge. When we started this agreement with Ripple, we continued to use our curbside recycling pickup. One of the trailers that we use had labels on several of the bins, so we just used one of the end caps to put our glass in. And then of course we are requesting our residents to do curbside sorting. They can always bring it out to the compactor transfer station as well, but one of the services, one of the fees they pay on their monthly utility bill includes this curbside service. So we do encourage them to use it. We try to make this as easy and convenient for them so we can get more cooperation, more habit forming procedures so that we can keep the recycling going even stronger. And of course, it helps out with costs on the end run because we're not hauling something to the landfill. So we started with our curbside pickup of our glass just along with all of our other weekly items, or yes, weekly. We currently do curbside recycling twice a month for each side of town, or 4 weeks out of the month. Just with our scheduling, if we happen to hit a 5th, we do it on Thursday mornings, we're unable to accommodate that pickup on that 5th Thursday, but our compactor solid waste station is always open on Thursday afternoons. So if somebody hits a limit, they got family coming or a big holiday and they need to relocate that to the recycling center, we do have that as an option for them. the successes that we can see from recycling, from glass recycling, one of them that was really noticeable right from the beginning is one of our local bars drastically cut their solid waste bill down. So they have a lot of cans, they have a lot of cardboard, and they have a lot of glass. They don't have food, so that wasn't an issue. Cans and cardboard were already recyclable, so it was a matter of when they were able to recycle their glass, instead of paying for a dumpster full of glass to go in the trash, they could then recycle that whole dumpster of glass. Which was wonderful to have because, as I have in the next point, when you can recycle that glass, as you saw earlier, it is dense, it's heavy, that's less weight we're hauling to the landfill. That's less amount that we're paying for that trash to be hauled away and at the landfill. And then it also gives our community a little more local control over those fees that we have to incur or end up charging to the citizens because we're doing our part to try to control our costs. So two really big successes or pluses for our program. The one challenge is ongoing, and it's with all recycling materials, not just glass. You have to constantly and continually educate your citizens, your community, keep popping up reminders or tidbits as to making it something more appealing to them, more real to them, convenient for them. This is nothing new for any kind of program you do, but we've made a habit of doing a monthly newsletter inside of our utility bill, and we put some little snippet, education piece, reminder on a recycling material every time we just pick up something new. And we also do something on a weekly basis with our city Facebook page. Wednesday nights, we put out a Facebook reminder. In fact, ours tonight came out at 5:45 in case anyone wants to pull it up and take a look. Tonight's, I think, was actually on electronics, but to take a little peek at a glass one, you can flip back to June 18th, and we had a glass post then. But every week we put a reminder out there as to which side of town we're doing curbside recycling pickup the following morning at 8 a.m. and then some little education piece or, just any kind of little reminder, statistic, anything to try to keep it going or keep their excitement or just have an aha moment sometimes too. One other thing that we're going to be doing shortly is we'd like to do some media coverage on our new baler that we just received from a grant through Nebraska Recycling Council. And we don't have everything set up ready to go, but once we get this all energized and ready to go, we're going to announce that as well, mainly for cardboard and plastics. But again, just keeping recycling on the forefront, keeping them educated on we're taking the next step, trying something in addition or new with, I guess, keeping recycling going and everything. As I was listening to the first panelist, another challenge, and I won't say it's been a strong challenge, we've been very blessed, but in city government, you have different council members, you have different mayors that come through during their terms or after they've filled a period of time. You have just different ideas, different opinions. And we have been really blessed with a terrific council over the years that I've been here and even before me that got it started, that have been strong proponents for recycling, see the value in it, and really energized to keep it going. We've had one council member even help out with different ideas on the marketing of our Facebook pages, our newsletters. We had just started doing a curbside trash tote a few years ago. And there was some real strong hesitation about that because we had several concerns with it's too easy, it's too convenient to throw those items in a trash tote rather than do your sorting and keep those items out for recycling pickup. You are really trying to encourage a habit to begin, but we've been very happy with the results that we've had, that we haven't seen our landfill weights going up drastically when those trash totes were introduced. So that's been a really nice surprise. And I think it also shows that our marketing, our reminders of recycling are doing their job, are helping out in that as well. my contact information is up. If there's something you think of down the road or want to check out our website or our Facebook page, um, let me know and I'd be happy to help you out.
Thank you so much, Dana. That was great. We have one question, and someone is asking if I understood correctly, you collect glass along with other recyclables. If correct, do you have issues with broken glass and contamination, as mentioned by the previous speaker, Kim?
We haven't had any issues with either one that I'm aware of. Yes, the glass will break as we are collecting it and putting it in one of the trailer compartments as we're going to go around, collect our curbside trash, and then take it out to the transfer station. But as I said, the pieces, it can be down to a half of an inch. And normally when we're dumping it, there's pieces much larger than that. So it hasn't been an issue for us.
Thank you so much. Oh, one more question. Someone is asking is any idea how much the city is saving per year? Oh my gosh. Sorry. Saving per year since you started your recycling program. What is the population in Neely?
Population of Neely is just a little over 1,500. As far as the amount of savings per year, I don't have a firm number for you right off bat. I can probably look back and find some volume as far as getting that, and I could help out with a number that we're currently paying to pay for our tonnage at the landfill. If that would help, if you don't mind sending me an email or something, I can certainly share that.
Yeah, for that. Okay, we can answer more questions at the end, but we're gonna now hand it over to Spud Rowley. And he will talk about his work in glass recycling. All right, are you all set, Spud?
Should be.
Share
I
your
will.
screen?
Yeah, I will share some of my stuff here in just a few minutes. I'm just going to kind of explain a few things. I come from some city superintendent specialties, working in various departments. Did that for about 15 years. Landfilling was kind of a big part of that. We've actually been for Keep Kimmel Beautiful in business for about 43 years as a nonprofit. I've been part of the Recycle Center for about 15 years, been doing the directorship for almost 10 years. And then kind of along with this whole deal with the recycling as director, educational director, is I actually haul a private business off the side, which has really collaborated with many communities on the whole western side of the state to be involved in all recycling and a big portion of this glass recycling status. So that's been about 8 years, and it's puzzled everything together with our whole area networking. Kimberly actually touched base with that. The first panelist, Dana, did on a few other questions. I'm not going to really reiterate a lot of that, but with some of our contamination, it's minor. It's minor with glass. We have again, with what they have shared, it's tremendous. So a lot of my, I guess, expertise that I should say is being a private hauler on the backside and doing the hands-on of what we bring in and transport. And I'll show you a couple pictures here. Can you see all that? Couple
Yeah.
pictures here. Okay, so let me blow this up. All right. And then, so we actually use chemical totes, which a lot of these come off like the interstate on highway projects, and a lot of ag chemical containers that they put chemicals and stuff in them. So this is kind of our main transport system, and we actually have a big storage facility in Kimball. So when Kimberly actually used the previous page, where the directions actually go with it is, as the private hauler, I load these on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, and I haul for a lot of contract stuff through the state through the Upper Loop NRD, which is out of Thedford. So Mullen takes glass, and on that research that Kim did. So Hershey, Ogallala, Binkelman, Sydney, Kimball. We actually have a community just right across our state line in Pine Bluffs, Wyoming, that we do some glass recycling for, and Harrisburg, Nebraska. So looking actually at that previous map, the whole western side basically gets to Kimball from my private hauling, which is collaborated through Keep Kimball Beautiful and the Recycle Center, kind of as a storage facility. And then I ship the glass out to Glass Recycling in Broomfield, Colorado, because that's our closest advantage point. Just a few statistics on the side of that. We've made it very convenient. And when Dana was talking about that with access and, the bunker, people actually have a few bunkers, and we try not to handle this as many times as we can, and being the most cost effective is when these are in these IBS totes, we actually have a forklift attachment, and it's basically called a floor clamp, and it's a rotator that picks up these containers, and I live load these in my roll-offs or my truck, and we ship these out. So it's kind of more convenient. They can sit outside like Dana and Kimberly talked about, where nothing breaks down. This glass crushes. We don't have to handle it. We don't have the contamination on the ground. We used to store a little bit of this stuff actually on the ground and kind of barricaded it with our totes. And it just got to an abundance where we had some leakage or whatever, with the rain and stuff like that. And sometimes it breaks down from the labels and stuff. So I don't know if you see this big picture. Kimberly kind of showed this. A lot of these totes are always interchanging all the time in different sections of our yard. And I just took a few pictures today. That's what some of these are, because I had some Dropbox issues. So I apologize for that. So there's still not some statistics up on the screen. But we so far this year have sent out 183,000, a little over 183,000 pounds of glass, which is about 91 ton so far this year. And we just sent out a little bit last week. So just into the third quarter, it varies on our program funding, grant funding, some of our cash match stuff that we actually do that for. And again, the piles always mismatch, go, and there's numerous around on some of these. So storage facility wise that we have an abundance of these chemical totes and ag totes, because our western side of the state that we utilize these for. So we get huge donation stuff from, like I said, the interstates, farmers, from the surrounding area, and even into Cheyenne County areas. So we have some drop-off facilities at some of our bars, which they're averaging. We have 3 bars in town, and this is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, but we are saving the stuff from going to the landfill. As Kimberly said, kind of the 1-to-1 ratio deal is we provide it for the easiest convenience that we can to capture this glass, and it is the dense, it is the heavy. And this stuff does not break down that well out at the landfill, so it does take up a lot of space. We, as the city of Kimball, we actually have our own private city-operated landfill and pickup service that we have through the city of Kimball. We occupy a city facility that they've used years ago in the past to actually store their garbage truck in. That we've basically acquired the whole property about the last 5 years. So our expansion into providing day-to-day glass drop-off, 24/7 facility drop-off to our, like I said, our facilities around town for our establishments through the bars. We have 3, and we have 1 bar now that's averaging about 3,000 pounds of glass a week. I mean, it's craziness. It's a new business that's just started. They pulled a lot of business out of the other, and everybody's up for competitive, but we try to just, again, we recuperate of all material that we can. And this has been a big juncture that we've done over the last few years. So we actually just have a few staging areas. And again, like I said, we actually have a floor clamp on our rotator, on our forklift, that we actually just pick these up. And then once they're actually emptied out, we haul these back around on our weekly or bi-weekly hauls that I do through, like I said, through clear up through Alliance, Thedford, Binkelman, Ogallala. So all of our main rotation stuff is just a big old circle of our area that we cover in all mixed materials, to fiber, cardboard, glass, electronics. And when people still say about glass, electronics, it is we try to offer the complete package that we do with the systems, because everybody wants to recycle everything that they can. And this is a big component because it is easy for us. Contamination wise, our biggest thing is bags. And it's not like it's a lot. You could probably take, even out of this row of like 20, we might come across, 4, 5, 6 bags in there. So very fluent of people direction. Dana also did the environmental education thing. It is a constant reminder for a lot of that information. And it's always trying to provide the best opportunity and less handling, less expensive way to do it. We do get some funding through the city to actually help us offset a few things. And we also get money from NDEE, which is our state affiliate stuff that we actually contribute to. And then there's been some equipment grant stuff out there through the NRC. So as this previous picture that I went back to, the blue dumpster there is our recycling bins kind of behind some of our facilities and our waste stream activity. The brown ones are trash. The middle one, blue one, is cardboard. And then that's their big business district there. And then again, we made it very convenient for some of the bars to actually just put glass right in the containers. They bring it right out. They dump all the glass in there, and then we pick it up. And again, we just swapped out a couple of these. If not, they were just overflowing a week ago when we actually just dumped some more glass. And as Kimberly said, the first panelist said that it's a various to mason jars to alcohol containers. This is our big component at our facility. We have those miscellaneous ones as food containers and some odds and stuff like that, which we've been very fortunate, I guess, not to actually have contamination. You can still have some corks on it. People are very still agile to like try to do the right thing, taking the lids off, washing stuff out. And a lot of that doesn't really matter when it comes to a lot of the glass recycling. See if I can. Oops. So other than that, our biggest glass load out, when Dana was talking about that they needed a minimum of like 25 ton to haul out, our biggest load that we actually hauled out from previous, when we used to stockpile a lot and actually have a truck haul this off, our biggest load out was 29.55 ton. That was about almost 60,000 pounds that we sent out. And currently right now, with what we actually have sitting on our property, and everybody says, why do you actually hold so much of this stuff? If we all had unlimited funding that we can ship off every piece of material that we had, we wouldn't have this problem. But we're sitting on about 400 totes of glass and an average about 350,000 pounds of glass. So again, when this rotation comes in, this is our storage facility bunker area. And again, we're just always moving. So in the last week, we've sent out like almost 80 totes. So, and that has already filled to another 25 that we just received in the last week, since I've kind of made my rounds for our weekly stuff. The landfilling portion of most of this is, our landfill is actually owned by the city of Kimball, which a lot of that stuff is private. Down east and throughout is our funding mechanism. Where that goes is, we did a breakdown many years ago where the average cost to actually landfill was about 17 cents a pound, and we can recycle for about 14 cents a pound. And what was intriguing about that was, we had a representative from Hershey that moved to town, was very against recycling. And I kind of tell this literature because it's prominent of our future of recycling, is was against it, was able to actually get on the Board of Public Works, which that's who we actually operate through as of some funding mechanisms. And they broke all this down with some help from another gentleman that actually sat on it, the Board of Public Works. And they came up with these statistics. And it actually made them realize that we are doing actually a substantial job of creating and doing a waste diversion programs in all aspects, glass especially one, because they can't fathom where a lot of this stuff comes from, let alone our partnerships with what we actually have, because we partner, of course, with everybody that we can, so we can actually stay as a nonprofit, stay in connection with our grant monies and stuff. I don't really have a whole lot more to share other than that, other than, like I said, the big piece that's actually puzzled this together as being a private hauler through my company, Raleigh Enterprises, that collectively gathers, like I said, basically the whole western side of the state. If you see that previous map from him, so there's been a little bit of expansion since then, and still more to come. So I don't know if there's a whole lot more questions, and I can answer. And
Thank you
I'll
so
actually,
much.
yeah, I'll actually type up my stuff up and on the Q&A. So if anybody has any questions,
Perfect. Yeah. If you want to pop things in the chat as well,
yeah.
go for it. We have 2 questions, but first we're actually going to launch our survey just to give people enough time to fill it out. Like I said, we would greatly appreciate it if you took the time to fill it out. It takes less than a minute and it helps with programming like this one. So now we're going to hop into some questions for the rest of our time together. Someone is asking, Spud, if a community in Western Nebraska is interested in adding glass to their recycling program, can they just call you, or is there a minimum amount they need to generate before you pick it up?
Nope, absolutely. They can just reach out, and like I said, let me I'll type in my information there, and then they can more than welcome give me a call. I am still a very old school person with that, so via phone call, and I do actually get some email stuff, but yes, not a problem there.
Perfect. And then someone else asking, so do you have to pay to ship the glass to the recycler?
So a lot of this is, like I said, we offer a lot of services through my own company that is part of our, like I said, area pickup that I do contract work for as like Alliance. It's kind of like a one-stop shop. When we pick up other materials, it's part of the load. If I'm going to actually just outreach to actually get glass, I always try to make it part of a load coming back, or kind of coming and going, because there is cost to some of this. So absolutely.
I have a question for you, and do you have like a max amount that you collect before you ship it out, or do you have like a schedule that you ship it out as, or is it kind of just as needed?
We just ship out as needed. As you see, those pictures were from today, since I had the Dropbox issue with my previous stuff on there. So, we can ship out. It truly depends. Last week we shipped out 2 loads just to get it out of here because we were backed up. And when I say backed up, is we have a big storage facility. We still have some area in the front. So there's no minimum. Like I said, it's just honestly funding wise, when we get some of our quarterly grant money back, or the starting of, some quarters that we actually move some of the material.
Um, I have a couple other questions, and if anyone else has questions, feel free to pop them in the chat for any of our panelists, or if you have general questions, every one of our panelists will try to answer them the best that they can. The questions I have might be more aimed towards Kim, but you all can pipe in as you see fit. Have you seen market changes, whether or like depending on if you're doing curbside or drop off for glass recycling? How have you seen like the numbers change reflecting that?
Are you referring to the value of the material itself? Is that what you're asking?
I was asking more like how did you like I think the city of Lincoln or different places have switched from either curbside
Mhm.
glass recycling or like the like ripple glass drop off sites. Have you seen a change or like either an increase or a decrease of how much
Mm.
you collect that way?
Yeah, so they are, I can speak to the city of Lincoln. I know they are currently looking at that data, so I don't have a true answer. Um, I think thinking through it from a general perspective, so we know with recycling, anytime you add like a threshold or a challenge to that, we'll usually see at least an initial drop in that. So I would suspect that I'm thinking about when they scaled back the recycling sites that were available. So I would assume that there was probably a little bit of an initial drop in that, and then as people get more comfortable or relearn their kind of area where their new site is going to be, we'll see that come back up to its baseline. But I know for the city of Lincoln at least, right now they are going through that data currently, so I don't have a true answer yet on it. Um, but it should be incoming here. We'll see what they end up with when they finish kind of going through that.
And then my other question is, you can all touch on this as well, is what did glass recycling look like in the state before Ripple Glass partnered in Nebraska?
I will let the other two. I've actually not ever been here when Ripple was not part of the system. And so I don't really have a good reference point of what that looked like ahead of them or before them. So I don't know if either of you have a weigh in on that.
We did not have any glass recycling before Ripple came into the picture. It opened a door for us when they made the offer to be collecting in the region, and I think it's because they had other communities in the region, so it was going to be just along their route, make it a little bit more feasible for them. But up to that point, we just didn't have an option to take it somewhere.
Someone is at, or but I don't know if you're gonna chime in, but I guess you don't directly work with Ripple, but someone is asking, is there any push in the state to get communities who do not recycle? I assume this is referring to glass recycling, to get on the bandwagon and start recycling.
Yeah, multiple. So our organization actually goes out and does some direct outreach to communities that we know are currently not recycling, is like all recycling efforts. So we do have the grant program for those. I know I work with and present to the League of Municipalities quite often, and interact with them to just kind of get those outreach to those clerks, to folks that are kind of thinking about it and starting those conversations up. And then I also know incoming, there's going to be another grant program funded through NET through a different organization. It'll be First Star Fiber that will be doing direct outreach to municipalities to start new recycling programs. So there's kind of a couple different things going on in conversations that are happening to try to get communities that don't have it or kind of figuring out why they don't. Where's the issue there, and then helping them get started with that. So I would say from our perspective, there's quite a few different ones. And sometimes it's just finding the right person and who needs to have that conversation and who all needs to be in the room with that conversation. But yeah, there's a lot of outreach happening and trying to get folks on board and connecting communities and building out some hub and spoke models for it.
Do we have any final questions before we let our panelists go? One question I had is there like programs that help aid with transportation of glass? I know we mentioned that there's lots of grants and different work throughout the state like that. Or also, do you know of any work that's being done within Ripple and the company out of Denver to offset their emissions of the transportation of glass as well?
So I'll actually speak to some of that. Through our funding, we actually get some money through the grant program through NDEE, which it's part of our transportation fee, which is a separate section of the grant. So we put some money into that. We have some offset funding that we also use from our city of Kimball, that we actually get some of our cash match money from there. So there's our funding wise. And previous, to go back to a little bit of outreaching from how long we've been actually like recycling glass through, so say the state of Nebraska, is we've been doing it for about 11, almost 12 years. And originally there used to be a company out of Laramie, Wyoming called Arc Recycling. So, and that was a very low key thing. baseline stuff. It was, occasional Gaylord box every, 2 months or whatever, as Dana kind of was talking. There's no set amount with it. So partnership wise that we've actually had, and maybe this filters since we're a little closer than like Ripple Recycling and stuff down to Kansas City and stuff like that. But funding is actually a big mechanism for that. The transportation of it, it's actually hard to just go pick up somebody's glass for no cost, and it is actually a low key. And basically across the border, where an average price is for that glass is we usually get a kickback of about $30 a ton. So that's why our leverage has to be so many ton to actually haul this stuff off. It doesn't seem like a lot. Trucking expenses have went way up along with everything else, as we know. And that's why even myself through my own company has offered services for a complete pickup. And again, I still stress that enough, and I've said that with Kimberly, is it's part of it. Not one person or one community want to just do glass recycling or paper or cardboard. It's the funding that actually makes it happen, and it's the connection with it all.
Yes, for sure. We have one question. It's asking, I assume it's easier to get community recycling if the city does the trash pickup. I'm in a community with private companies. How does that impact getting the program going? So I don't know who wants to touch on that, or all of you can as well.
I guess I can touch on the city side versus private, because I do both of that in different communities, and it's a big portion, because if there's already a service provided for even a small recycling center, that's where a service pickup program comes in, where it's at, if it's part of the route, if it's north, if it's wherever Western would be, or it's just part of that area of where you can actually collaborate it to pick it up, or try to stop by on a quarterly basis. Maybe it's a 6 month basis, like Dana was talking, and we're all outreach. And again, you look at that map, and there's lots of in between on the map that is undesirable, as long as you can get it in rotation instead of a special trip. So I have always tried to present it to that, to get it out there. And again, it's a whole different aspect from a private hauler, and still doing what we're doing as affiliate services, and breakdown through grants, because it's all about funding.
I'll say that if you can get any recycling started, it will snowball from there. Because once you get one product to start being collected, they're asking what else they can do. Part of our education piece is really putting it back in the frame of what are they going to save? How does it impact them? How do they save on the cost of what they spend on a bag or a trash tote if they're not filling it up with materials that can be recycled? So if you can keep relating it to how's it going to save your citizens some money, how's it going to save your city some money when they're trying to operate it, you get more momentum, you get more collaboration, and you just get more discussions to make everything come to fruition. Everyone's starting to talk about budgets and stuff right now. Everyone gets a little gun shy to get that initial project started off the ground. But if you don't start, you don't know what you could be saving, but you definitely know what you're paying for costs. So chances are you're going to drop one of those expenses. It's just a matter of how much that you want to make it drop.
I'll actually add on to that really quick if I can. With the city and being involved with the city stuff so much, our last landfill expansion was $1.2 million. They're talking about another 6 years that they're going to do another cell, and that estimated cost is $2.8 million to actually just open the cell. When actually private companies come in to actually elaborate on that a little bit more. Private, it's all paid. It doesn't matter. You pay a price, they're going to pick it up regardless if it's trash, recyclables, and they get paid to do that. But going across the whole state of Nebraska, and I might be a little off here, but I think the last number that I was told was about 26 landfills across the whole state of Nebraska. And if you actually individualize that, there's a lot of stuff coming out of Alliance that actually gets hauled down to Ogallala. Sydney has a facility. Kimball has a facility. So there are trucks moving across the whole state of Nebraska, not to their own local facility. and there's another cost with that. So it's equipment costs. It's a whole budget item that's across the board instead of just saying landfill versus recycling is cheaper than this. And again, we've proved them wrong on a few statistics like that.
Thank you all. This has been amazing. Unless we have any final questions, feel free to pop those in the chat, the Q&A real quick. Thank you all for your time tonight presenting. Thank you all participants for asking all of your questions. Oh, we have one more question. I live in Omaha, where glass can be recycled at drop-off bins instead of curbside with other recyclables. How can a citizen advocate for glass to be included in curbside recycling?
I can kind of weigh in here. So I think that's a losing battle in Omaha, because of population size and because of there is Glassman Recycling will do pickups there. And so you can pay for an additional service, but Omaha has kind of a completely different system than every other place here in Nebraska. So theirs is from the city, has a hauler contract. You might be able to advocate for something like a dual stream bin, but know that that's going to increase your cost as a citizen by proxy of your taxes, essentially. So that you're paying for it, it's built into a different system, though. It's not a direct pay, where somewhere like Lincoln, where I pay a service fee to my hauler, you're paying kind of built into that tax thing with that. So the other piece of that is looking at the full picture and full system. Your stuff is going to move curbside recycling. There is going to go to First Star Fiber. Their end market that they're going to then sell to, it doesn't want that contamination. And so there's a lot of pieces that'll have to change, and for you to get a full single stream recycling curbside option, I would say obviously it does make it easier. We know there's more buy-in. We know you'll get more glass returned in that way if it's easier for folks to do. I don't foresee that system really changing too much. Like I said, you could advocate for building a dual stream system in there, or contacting kind of that private external glass only hauling thing there. I don't know if anyone else has a weigh in on that. Omaha is kind of unique in our state that they have a little bit different than everywhere else.
Kimball actually does some single stream recycling, and we don't advocate like lots to actually put glass in our single stream, but we actually do get a small fluctuation of glass that comes in, and the contamination is absolutely minimal. And it's because we provide the other service, the 24-hour drop sites, that's not locked or gated. And like I said, it's been very, very worthy to actually have that happen. And our population's about 2,500. So it does make a big difference. And we still use the ISB totes in our single stream alleys because to actually keep that cost down, so we don't have the single rollers like the bigger communities, is we have multi bins that we just put in the alley for the ISB totes that multiple families can actually use those, and we do a weekly pickup service.
We've got two more questions. Someone said, I'm advocating for residents affected by natural disasters like tornadoes. I'm looking for drop-off and pickup opportunities for the Elkhorn area and Waterloo for property cleanup projects for those houses declared as a total loss. Okay, I'm not seeing how this quite relates to glass, but if this is more specific to glass, could you clarify that in the comments? And then someone else is asking, can anyone speak about the recycling opportunities or capabilities for parks and rec areas?
I can. We actually used to previously do some fair stuff in out of the ballparks. Nacho cheese is nobody's favorite fan with some of our containers out there. And if you think about it, our glass ratio even to that, but we get a lot of the aluminum and plastic that we used to use, but it's trash. So we've actually pulled away from some of our fair activities and our park and rec only because it's not monitored 24/7. and not a good thing or a bad thing. It was just a contamination of trash. And like I said, washing out our bins, keeping our bins clean and stuff like that. For the city of Kearney thing, they actually do have a bunker like Dana does. And I've actually been down there to visit the facilities and much across the whole state that you can actually bag the glass. I mean, there's vases, there's glass bottles, there's so much that actually doesn't break, and people can't fathom that. But that is truly what it is. And again, we don't push for glass recycling in our totes because it's just not a whole lot of the waste stream.
I will say that we tried separate bins in our parks during some baseball tournaments. I don't think it was during the county fair, but different seasonal or events down in our park. And I'll repeat what Spud is saying too. It was just too easy for the whole trash bag to be put in there rather than sorting it out. So we did our part to sort it out when we had to take it out to the recycling center, but it just didn't work out for us. You have a lot of compliance when it's at their home. We didn't have a lot of compliance when it was down in the park. So we've got to come up with some other idea to try.
Thank you for sharing such great responses to that. Okay, I think as of now, we don't have any final questions. Oh, I spoke too soon. Oh, okay, so a clarification on that past question, seeing if there's a possibility to have access for a bid on properties needing to clean up after natural disasters to contribute to glass recycling. I don't know who wants to touch on that, or if any of you all have an answer on that.
So typically whoever's doing the cleanup for that would bring that resource with them. I think maybe you're asking I would say a lot of the cleanup things you're gonna get like a landfill roll off, and so maybe it's that company, but that would be an ask kind of for the cleanup because that gets into insurance and some other things. I'm not sure if I fully am understanding the question still. But typically the folks that come in to do that cleanup effort are going to bring those materials with them. And it's just going to be based on their policies and procedures and what they look at versus like deconstruction versus putting to landfill, and how much of that sorting and how much recovery. Typically, if it's a natural disaster, the deconstruction is not feasible anymore because things have been destroyed, like broken down to a point where it's not worth that recovery effort. And so you will see a lot of the landfill bins, but like I said, I'm not 100% sure if I'm fully understanding that, but usually that's a separate entity is kind of coming in and they're bringing what they will use for it.
You again. Okay. If we don't have any more questions, I think that concludes our webinar tonight. Thank you all for filling out our survey. We got 100% of responses on that, which is amazing. If you want to share this with someone who wasn't able to attend tonight, or if you want to watch it again, this webinar will be posted on our YouTube in the near future with all of our past webinars. I will be following up with all of our participants, and I will send all of their contact information your way. If you have any questions, I know they would love to answer them. Thank you so much for attending tonight's webinar and learning more about glass recycling in Nebraska. And most importantly, thank you, Kim, Dana, and Spud for this presentation and giving us your time and talent and answering all of our questions. I hope everyone has a great rest of your night, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.